After launching the attack, the old man grabbed the sword's hilt with one hand, began to sheath it, and started staring intently at Zhang and Xiaobayan. One of the men standing behind him was the vice commander Yang Guang. With a calm look, he informed him that all 300 geniuses were present. He asked him to please prepare to go up on stage and lead the opening ceremony. The old man sheathed his sword and began walking towards the stage. The people who were present in the camp started conversing among themselves. Some had heard that there were many Tanzhou camps in the Jiangnan area, but none had ever had a king-level figure in charge. For them, this was terrifying, as even standing dozens of meters back, the king of the celestial sword could kill them with a single move. One of them explained to the others that this was very strange, since they had said that the old master was living in seclusion. He didn't know why he was coming out now. Some of them just heard the instructors talking privately, that it seemed like the old master was going to take the initiative to ask for this. They didn't know if he wanted to recruit a disciple. If this were the case, then they should do well. Although some knew well that people like them should stop dreaming about it, because if he really were recruiting, then he would only recruit the best. Tang Ying started to stare at the old man and couldn't help but be shocked to see that the old celestial had come. Bai Feng, who was standing next to her, began to look at the old man with a surprised gaze and couldn't help but feel excited as he had finally met the living legend in person. Xiao Baiheng started to look at the old man with a determined gaze and decided to defeat Zhang Wuxiang once the camp began in order to leave a good impression on the old master. Wuxiang cracked his fingers and couldn't help but feel excited since he had thought they wouldn't be able to invite the old man. He decided to make him his master. Mu Hankyu clenched her fists tightly, brought them close to her face, and couldn't help but be left open, mouthed and astonished at the same time. Zhang started pointing at the old man with his finger, and with a confused look asked Luo Sando if they recognized that powerful old master. She got very excited, approached Zhang, clenched her fists, and with a joyful look responded yes. She had been hearing about his legend since she was young. She began to recall the old man's incredible feats. One day a powerful red dragon appeared, but the old man jumped on its head and using all his strength drove the sword into its skull, causing it to open its mouth and start screaming in pain. She explained to Zhang that the old man was not an awakener but could suppress a group of 7th, transfer seal kings and become number 1 under the Jian Empire. His skills were even comparable to those of an 8th, transfer from the Jian Empire. Once he had killed a dragon with a single blow, Mu Hankyu put her hand under her chin, closed her eyes and began to think. She explained to them that although both were at the level of a seal king, the senior celestial leaf king was the most respected existence by her grandfather. Her grandfather once asked her to become his disciple, but he rejected her. At first she was very frustrated but then heard that many descendants of the Jian Empire and Invincibles had also been rejected. Jiang started looking at the old man and, with a confused look, asked them if they were sure it was very difficult to become his disciple. Mu Hankyu approached Jiang and with a sincere look asked him if he was joking. As far as she knew, Zhang Wuxiang and Baifeng had been rejected by the sword god before. Jiang had seen Zhang Wuxiang and the rest of their abilities. It was unimaginable how difficult it was to become a disciple of the old man. Upon hearing this, Zhang began to look at her with a shocked expression, and started to wonder if it was really that difficult to become the old man's disciple. Lo Sando approached them. She began pointing towards the sky with her finger, and with a serious look explained to them that they might not know it. But the old master had only accepted 2 disciples in his entire life, and that had been more than 20 years ago. Zhang began to recall how the old man had been hugging the tree like a lunatic. He also remembered how when he was putting away the sword he had asked him if he was willing to learn from him. Jiang closed his eyes and began to question whether the strange old man who climbed trees was the king of the celestial sword that everyone was really talking about. According to him, they did not seem like the same person. While a drop of sweat was falling from his cheek, with a forced smile he responded that now he understood everything. The old man got on stage and coughed to get everyone's attention. With a serious look, he introduced himself as Gu Kaishan, the chief instructor of Tanjiao camp. He put both hands on the table and reminded everyone that, as they all already knew, the Tanjiao camp in their Jiangnan area had been performing below average in recent years because the fights here were just a farce. If one did not dare to give it their all here, in a real battlefield with real dangers, they would only end up dead and without burial. He revealed to everyone that there were more and more monsters in this world. He grabbed the microphone tightly and with a smile told them that they needed more capable geniuses. Therefore, to better showcase and unleash their geniuses' abilities and make a better selection, this year he had established a new rule for the Tanjiao camp in the Jiangnan area. He called this rule death quota. Upon hearing this, Yang Guang, who was standing behind him, couldn't help but be shocked. With a look full of fear, he interrupted Gu Kaishan and tried to stop him. But he put his hand in front of him indicating that he should not speak anymore, and with a smile explained to everyone that here he was the one who had the last word. Therefore, if something happened, he was going to take all the responsibility. Yang Guang started sweating like crazy and with a confused look began to wonder what death rate Gu Kaishan was talking about. His superiors had not mentioned this before, and there hadn't been one before in the history of Tanjiao camps. There were many powerful geniuses down there, so he didn't know if this was going to create chaos. Gu Kaishan took the microphone, brought it close to his mouth, and with a serious look told them that today 10 of them were going to die for him in each round of the test. He also added that if anyone wanted to withdraw, they could do so now. Many of the participants panicked. A boy started looking at his friend with a look full of fear and explained to him that although this was terrible, he couldn't withdraw because otherwise his whole family would be shamed. His friend swallowed hard and with a trembling voice told him that he didn't want to die. Wu Shuang, who was standing in front of them with crossed arms, remained calm, began to smile and thought that this was expected from the senior Celestial Blade King. According to him, the Tanjiao camp in Jiangnan area should have done this years ago. Xiao Baiyan turned his head back, started staring at Zhang and with a smile came to the conclusion that this rule had been made especially for him. When the camp starts later, he was going to be able to fulfill 2 of the old master's quota. Zhang started looking at Xiao Baiyan and began wondering what this guy was plotting. With a calm look, he concluded that with this quota, even if the conflict escalated later and he killed Xiao Baiyan, Uncle Jiagang and the others wouldn't have to worry too much. Several minutes passed and no one withdrew. Seeing this, Go Keaton, who was holding the microphone in one hand, put his other hand on his waist and couldn't help but start smiling since according to him it seemed like everyone had some pride. Behind him stood the 4 vice commanders. He extended his hand to one side and with a shout, announced that the entrance evaluation to the camp had officially begun. There were 300 people in the first round. Half of them were going to be eliminated. He grabbed the hilt of his sword and while unsheathing it, with a serious look he explained to them that within the camp, 150 advancement flags had been randomly hidden. He also added that he didn't care what methods they used to get the flags. The round was going to end at dawn on the second day, and those who had the flags would advance to the next round. He unsheathed his sword, began pointing its blade at them, and while his eyes were shining, asked them to fight confidently and kill confidently. They could fight alone or form alliances. They were even allowed to destroy the entire camp if they wished. In short, he wanted to see their bloodlust. After saying this, he raised the sword to the sky and gave everyone the order to disperse as the test had begun. Upon hearing his order, everyone started running. Some knew that with their current skills, the best method was to find flags, hide, and avoid ruthless people according to them. This was the safest way to advance to the next round. While everyone was running, Seiho Baekyan began to smile, as his body was surrounded by a powerful blue energy. He unsheathed his sword, extended it to one side and started walking towards Zhang. While little by little he was getting closer, Zhang, who was standing next to Mu Han Kaiwu and Luo Sando, remained silent. Zhang extended his hands to the sides, started staring at Seiho Baek, and gave them the order to look for nearby advance flags since he was going to take care of him. Mu Han Kaiwu did not know what Zhang was thinking. With a panicked look she asked him if he was sure. Just before she could finish the sentence, he extended his hand to one side, adopted a defensive pose, and told her that this was an order. Upon hearing this, Mu Hankao and Luo Sando turned their backs on him and started running. While Seiho Baekhyun's body was surrounded by powerful blue mana, he began to laugh and mocked him by asking if a rookie like him who hadn't even made a second transfer wanted to be a hero. Zhang extended his hand to one side, causing it to start releasing the poisonous mist of Little Nine. Although Seiho Baekhyun's sword energy was truly astonishing, it was much inferior compared to Saiho Yun Wu's, even though he was now much stronger than before. He didn't know if it would be possible for him to deal with Seiho Baekhyun, using only poison without exposing the existence of the mother insect. With a calm look, he asked him to stop talking nonsense. Seiho Baekhyun listened and decided not to waste more words on a dead corpse. Using all his strength, he launched a powerful slash towards Zhang. While Zhang's body was surrounded by Little Nine's poisonous mist, he prepared himself for defense. But just before Seiho Baekhyun's attack could reach him, someone asked him to stop and threw some small knives at his attack, shattering it into pieces. This person was none other than Tang Ying. While she was holding knives in her hands, she began to stare at Seiho Baekhyun with an angry look. Seiho Baekhyun, who was holding the sword with one hand, began to look at her with a serious expression and asked what she was doing. When looking to the side, Zhang saw Tang Ying with a surprised look. He began to question whether she was the female assassin. Tang Ying put her hands on her hips, approached him, and shouted if he had forgotten their agreement with Baekhyun. They had agreed to kill Wu Shuang once the camp started, yet he constantly went off to deal with insignificant matters. She didn't know if he was using these excuses deliberately, because he was actually afraid of Wu Shuang. Seiho Baekhyun clenched his fist tightly, and with an angry look asked her who had said that he was afraid. Both turned their backs on Zhang and started walking towards the area where Wu Shuang was. Seiho Baekhyun, who was furious, asked her where he was. He decided to deal with him first since it wasn't too late to handle the trash afterward. Tang Ying began pointing in the direction where Wu Shuang was, and explained that he had headed towards the forest and Baekhyun was chasing him now. Zhang deactivated Little Nine's poisonous mist, started looking at them and felt relieved since things had really taken a turn. He didn't know who Tang Ying was but felt that she was intentionally helping him. Once they moved away a bit, Tang Ying turned back, put her finger near her mouth and winked at him. Seeing this, he realized that she was indeed helping him, but he didn't know why since they didn't even know each other. She began to look down with a sad expression. She was the niece of Tang Jin. His aunt had asked her to secretly take care of Zhang Chen in the Tanzhou camp, but with her current abilities, she couldn't fight Seiho Baekhyun directly. She could only use Wu Shuang's name to try to delay his movements. A man with black hair who was carrying a bow on his back and holding several flags in his hands approached them, knelt before him, and explained that his father was the subordinate of his grandfather. These 3 advancement flags he had were a sign of his dedication to him. He was the 6th venerable transfer descendant named Huang Yongkao. Seiho Baekhyun approached him, and with a serious look told him that he did not need the flags. He also added that if he really wanted to show his loyalty, then he could help him do something. Tang Ying crossed her arms and remained silent. Huang Yongkao, who was kneeling before him, explained that his subordinate would serve him with the utmost loyalty. Tang Ying began to look at Seiho Baekhyun, and thought that this was not good since now Zhang would have to take care of this himself, but she hoped that Mu Hankyu and Luo Sandao could protect him. At the same time, Luo Sandao obtained 2 advancement flags while she was holding them in her hand. She closed her eyes and with a joyful smile explained to Zhang that she had just found 2 flags. She arrived at the area where Zhang was and placed the flags on the table. Zhang, who had one hand resting on his waist, with a calm voice asked them both to take the flags first since he was going to another place to take a look. She rested both hands on it, and told him that they were going to help him find it together, and Mu Hankyu, who was standing next to her, crossed her arms and remained silent. At that moment, someone shot an arrow, which began to move at great speed towards them. Zhang didn't take long to sense this. He put his hand under the table and asked them to be careful, just before the arrow could get close. Zhang threw the table into the sky with all his strength, causing it to collide directly with the arrow. The attack was so powerful that the table was shattered into pieces. Luo Sandow started looking up, and upon seeing this, she couldn't help but panic and start feeling scared as she didn't know what was happening. She quickly hid behind Zhang, placed both hands on his arm, and peeked out a little to see what was happening. He went on alert and with a serious look, shouted and asked who was attacking, and if they wanted to steal their flags. Mu Henkyu drew the two daggers, held them in both hands, and adopted a defensive stance. The person who had launched the attack was none other than Huang Yongchao. He jumped, drew his bow, started aiming at Zhang, and while the arrow was surrounded by a powerful energy, he began to stare at him, and revealed that he did not want the flag but wanted to take his life. He prepared to shoot the arrow towards Zhang, causing the arrow to start emitting even more energy. They looked up at the sky, and upon seeing that it was Huang Yongchao, they revealed to Zhang that he had the hidden profession called Extreme Archer of the Sun Chaser. He was level 39 and his father was a venerable of 6th transfer. He was a subordinate of Zhao from the Zhang Empire. Luo Sandow did not know if her Eternal Earth Shield would be able to stop the attack. With a penetrating gaze, Huang Yongchao launched the arrow towards them. It began advancing at great speed towards them. The blade grew larger and was covered in energy. As the arrow gradually approached, Zhang decided to do something about it. He asked both of them to step aside. He jumped, and while his eyes were shining, he began to advance towards the attack. He extended his hand, causing the palm to start releasing Little Nine's poisonous mist. With an angry look, he explained to them that he could tolerate everything else, but if they wanted to kill him, then they shouldn't blame him for being ruthless, since after all someone had to fulfill the old master's death quota. Luo Sandow, who was behind Zhang, couldn't help but clutch her chest in fear, and Mu Henkyu, who was holding the two daggers, started looking at him with a surprised expression and couldn't help but begin wondering what he planned to do. Zhang launched Little Nine's poisonous mist towards Huang Yongchao, blocking the attack. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part, the mist was so powerful that it not only blocked the attack but also shattered it and began advancing towards him. While Huang Yongchao was flying in the air, the poisonous mist approached him. While holding the bow with one hand, he started looking around, and upon seeing poison, he couldn't help but panic, since he had been told that Zhang was of the life type. With a look full of fear, he asked others not to hide and to come attack altogether. Just before he could finish speaking, Little Nine's poisonous mist reached him and impacted his body, corroding and tearing him into pieces, causing him to start screaming in agony. The poisonous mist grew larger and the insects began to devour his body. His companions turned their backs on him and started to flee out of fear. They did not want to fight against a guy who had awakened the hidden poison class. Now that even long-range shooters like Huang Yongchao had not been able to deal with him, much less would those who had close combat classes be able to. They thought they were lucky since they escaped in time. Otherwise, they would have been cannon fodder. In a matter of seconds, the insects began to devour Huang Yongchao's body. Zhang, who was standing next to him, was controlling the swarm of insects. At the same time, in the observation room were Yang Guang and Gu Kaishan, watching everything that was happening in the camp through some cameras. Gu Kaishan started to look at Zhang, and seeing how strong he was, he couldn't help but praise him upon noticing that he not only had the creation class, but also had the poison class. Yang Guang, who was standing behind him, was speechless. With a surprised look, he began to wonder how it was possible that Zhang had killed so quickly a second transformation prodigy. For him, Zhang Chen was incredible. He didn't know why the city's night watch hadn't reported anything. While he was deep in his thoughts, Gokaishin turned his head towards him, and with a serious look asked him to go inform the others, and also bring some great masters of the spatial system, since this was an emergency moment. They needed transfer at any time to prevent Zhang from killing too many people. Hearing his voice, Yang Guang snapped out of his trance and responded affirmatively, deciding to go inform immediately. He turned his back on him, started running, clenched his teeth tightly, and with a worried look decided to take advantage of the fact that the elder had not changed his mind to leave quickly, because if the prodigies really began a massacre, then the consequences would be unimaginable. Gu Kaishin put his hand under his chin, started observing Zhang and coughed to get Yang Guang's attention. Upon hearing his voice, he stopped running, turned around with a surprised look and asked if there was any problem. Deep down, he didn't know if this old man was regretting all of this. Gu Kaishan put his hand under his chin, started looking at the ceiling with a lost gaze, and asked him to bring 10 third-level ferocious beasts and release them separately. He also gave the order to place the advance flag on the ferocious beasts. Yang Guang turned around, gave a military salute, and with a confused look responded with an understood. He couldn't help but be somewhat impressed, since the move the old man had just made was astonishing, because in this way, those demons could go first to fight for the advance flag and avoid harming others. At the same time, Tang Yin Baifeng and Xiao Baiheng surrounded Wu Shuang. The three drew their weapons and prepared to attack, while on the other side he crossed his arms. Baifeng had been fighting against him for several minutes and was quite tired. He put his hand on his chest where he had the wound and began to pant heavily. Wu Shuang started looking at him and reminded them again that even if they joined forces, they wouldn't be able to defeat him. He didn't know if they really wanted to die. He mocked them by asking if they would feel proud after winning in a 1-against-3 fight. Xiao Baiyang gripped the sword tightly, causing the blade to start emitting a powerful blue energy. He began to stare intently at him and explained that although it was dishonorable to win with superior numbers, he couldn't avoid fighting people who weren't boring. At that moment, the loudspeaker started to sound and notified everyone that Huang Yongqiao had been eliminated by Zhang Cheng. Upon hearing this, everyone was in shock as they couldn't believe Zhang had made the first kill. Unlike the others, Wu Shuang remained calm. With a worried look, Xiao Baiheng thought that although Huang Yongqiao had average strength, at least he was good and was in the second transformation. In this camp full of geniuses, he was among the top 50. He was much stronger than Xiao Yuanwu, and yet had been killed in the blink of an eye. Tang Ying, who was holding several knives with her fingers, with a terrified look, she thought that this was not good since her aunt had told her that Zhang was only level 26 of the creation class. She did not know how he, a person of level 26, could have instantly killed a person of level 39 from the combat class. Not even she, an assassin, could have killed Huang Yongqiao so quickly. Bai Heng started looking towards the sky, and with a smile came to the conclusion that this time the Tanjiao camp was full of hidden talents. Wu Shuang brought his hand to his face, started looking at them, and with a smile asked if they were not going to face an expert like Zhang. They ignored him and prepared to attack again. But just before they could make a move, the camp notified everyone that 10 third-level fierce beasts were going to be released, and each one was going to have an advancement flag. Everyone who possessed the advancement flag would get an additional score in the ranking. All those who were among the top 10 would receive a reward, with the first-place reward being 100 million. Upon hearing this, Xiao Baiheng and the others jumped and moved away from the area. Wu Shuang, who had his arms crossed, began to smile. Once everyone left, he stood still and thought that the King of Celestial Sword had given them new toys. He thought this was fine and decided to compete for and seize the blue flag. At the same time, Jiang started to look to one side and couldn't help but be surprised when he remembered that they had just entered the camp and the first place was already going to receive a reward of 100 million. For him, this prodigy camp was too generous. If he took first place and obtained the rewards and resources, the insects would be able to reproduce faster again. At that moment, something giant began to fall from the sky. Zhang, who wasn't far away, went on alert and started wondering what this was. A giant mutant beast in the shape of a wolf fell from the sky and landed near Zhang. Lu Sando, who was next to him, explained that the first fierce beast had fallen beside them. Zhang began to look at the beast with a confused gaze and realized that this was a third-level beast. Lu Hengqiu, who was nearby, panicked and asked everyone to be careful since the strength of this beast was equivalent to a level 90 awakened. Little by little, the beast started to stand up. Lu Sando looked with some attention, and she realized that it was in a state of paralysis. She asked him if they should take advantage of this situation. While little by little the beast was getting to its feet and regaining consciousness, Zhang began to advance towards it and prepared to attack, making his hands start to release the poisonous mist. He decided to take advantage of this and asked the others to move away. He prepared to attack, but at that moment someone launched a powerful slash towards him. However, he reacted in time, jumped and dodged the attack at the last second. He couldn't help but feel somewhat confused as he didn't know who had launched this attack. Several seconds later, he landed on the ground, clenched his fist tightly and began to wonder what was happening. The person who had launched the attack was Xiao Baihan. He was standing on top of the beast's head and holding the sword with one hand. He began to stare at Zhang and with a smile thought that not only had he killed Huang Yongqiao in a second, but now he dared to steal the advanced flag. Zhang extended his hand towards him, releasing Little Nine's poisonous mist and asked him if he was going to fight, then stop all this talk. Xiao Baihan jumped and used the technique called Heaven and Earth Wind Dragon Slash. He launched a powerful slash towards him, which started destroying everything in its path. His attack collided with Zhang's, causing the poisonous mist to start disappearing. He positioned himself on top of the beast's head, and while his sword was surrounded by a powerful energy, he thought it was no wonder that Zhang was so arrogant, since it turned out that he had the hidden poison type. It was said that the poison type was difficult to handle, but in front of his sword's wind, it amounted to nothing. Wu Hangqiu clashed her fist with her palm, started looking at him, and with a serious look thought that Zhang was in danger since the wind could face and defeat the poison type. She thought they should help him as soon as possible. Lu Sandao, who was next to her, started looking at her with a surprised look and explained to her that Zhang's poison wasn't an ordinary poison. If they went to help, all they would do is cause more problems. Zhang adopted an offensive stance, and while his body was surrounded by poison, he began to stare intently at Xiao Baihan and decided it was time to end this. He used the technique called Poisonous Mist Dragon, causing a giant dragon made of poison to appear. It opened its mouth and prepared to attack, seeing the size of the dragon. Xiao Baihan couldn't help but panic and think that this wasn't good. He decided not to stand idly by, grabbed the sword firmly, brought his fingers close to the blade of the sword, and realizing that this poisonous mist was not going to disperse with a strike, decided to absorb it. The dragon opened its mouth and prepared to attack. He extended the sword towards the sky and used the technique Forbidden Spell, called Immortal Swordsman of Blue Lotus, causing a giant flower to appear behind him. The giant flower began to absorb the poison dragon. He asked him to watch how his sword's energy was going to consume all of his poisonous mist. While Jiang's eyes were shining, he started to smile and asked if he was serious. With his sword energy blocking the view, it was even easier to swallow. Little Nine manifested herself. She closed her eyes, opened her mouth, and began to consume the flower that Xiao Baihan had created. For her, this sword energy was very delicious. Thanks to this, Zhang gained 2,000 devouring value. He started looking at Little Nine and thought she was eating the whole flower. He reached out his hand towards the sky, and in the blink of an eye, the flower that Xiao Baihan had created broke into pieces, releasing poisonous mist. The poisonous mist attacked Xiao Baihan, causing his body to be thrown backward and crash into the ground. He opened his mouth and began to scream in pain. Zhang clenched both fists tightly, and now that Little Nine had consumed the energy of the flower, the poison dragon became even bigger and more terrifying. Xiao Baihan fell to the ground, grabbed the sword with one hand, and thought this was not possible. He did not know what kind of poison could annihilate a sword's energy. Zhang attacked him using the poison dragon, but just before the attack could impact against him, he hugged himself and used the life gem, causing a barrier to appear around his body. He took the sword, stood up, and seeing that his poison couldn't break through the life gem's shield, he thought Jiang was doomed to die. He started looking at him and thought that the Xiao Baihan family really had second chances. But it was a pity because in this battlefield there were cameras everywhere, and he couldn't let the insects reveal their true form. He turned his head to one side where Lu Sando was in with a calm look, asked if she could create an opaque earth shield that covered the entire place. She clenched both fists tightly and told him that she would try. She extended her hands towards the sky, causing her energy to start advancing towards the sky. She used the technique called Earth Protection Shield Cover. By doing this, a shield was created around the area. Xiao Baihan started to look towards the sky with a confused look and asked him what he was doing. Lu Sando put both hands on her knees, lowered her head, and began to pant heavily as she had used a lot of energy to create the shield. While Zhang's hand was releasing the poisonous mist from Little Nine, he started looking at him and asked if he could guess how Xiaoyu and Lu Sando were doing. While Xiao Baihan's body was surrounded by the magical barrier, he extended the sword to one side, and with an angry look asked Jiang if he was really comparing the worthless power of that piece of trash with his. According to him, Jiang was knave. Jiang simply remained calm and silent for several seconds. At that moment, Little Nine reappeared. She began to stare at Xiao Baihan with a sinister look and started to smile. While Jiang's body was surrounded by Little Nine's poisonous mist, with a calm look he asked him if he was really comparing the current him to the past him. Thinking this way was indeed knave. He began to get tired of him and ordered Little Nine to manifest and give him a beating. She extended her hands to the sides, and while her body was releasing a powerful energy, she began to advance towards Xiao Baihan and decided to follow Zhang's order. Xiao Baihan put the sword in front of his face to defend himself from the attack, and with a confused look he began to wonder who she was. Little Nine started moving at high speed and began attacking him. But he started blocking the attacks using the sword. No matter from which direction she attacked, he managed to block all the attacks. Upon seeing this, Zhang was surprised. With a perplexed look he began to wonder if he was using the energy of the protective sword. He did not expect Xiao Baihan to have this kind of ability at a moment like this. Luckily for Xiao Baihan, the beast appeared. It gave a great leap, opened its mouth, and prepared to attack Little Nine. She and he started looking to one side, and upon seeing this they went on alert. Jiang didn't take long to realize what was going to happen. He extended his hand towards her, causing his hand to start emitting the poisonous mist. He began staring intently at the beast, and upon seeing that it had also awakened, he decided that now it was time to unleash all their power. He extended his hand towards the beast and summoned 2 dragons made of poisonous mist, and gave them the order to corrode Xiao Baihan and cover Little Nine. He also summoned the small insects and told them that there was top-quality fierce beast meat. The first to arrive would be the first to eat the beast. Upon hearing this, they appeared, started advancing towards them and prepared to attack. Now that the dragons and small insects had appeared, Little Nine began running towards him and started smiling. Xiao Baihan put both arms in front of his face, and thought this was not good since the sword's energy had been corroded, and now he could no longer cause damage. The beast turned around, opened its mouth, and seeing that Little Nine was ready to attack, began to roar to warn Xiao Baihan about the attack. Little Nine approached him, and now that he could no longer block the attacks, she began to hit the magic barrier with all her strength. Her fist started impacting against the barrier, and it gradually began to weaken. Zhang, who was nearby, started watching them and realized that Xiaoxiangguo favored some grandchildren over others, and for this reason it was much more difficult to defeat Xiao Baihan than Xiao Yuanwu. She began to hit even harder, and little by little the barrier started to crack. While her eyes were shining, she started staring at him. Xiao Baihan, who was inside the barrier, couldn't help but start sweating and panicking. Even though the barrier was strong, Little Nine was going to break it with blows. It was only a matter of time. If before she had needed 3 seconds, now she would need at most 3 minutes. At the same time, in the surveillance room, Yuan Guang began to observe the fight. According to the screen, it could be seen that there was a blue magical barrier in the area which prevented people outside from seeing inside. Upon seeing this, he realized that Xiao Baihan was at a disadvantage now that Jiang had blocked the surveillance. He gave Fang Chenjiwan the order to conduct a manual investigation, and if the situation was not good, to stop the combat immediately. He was Fang Chenjiwan, the great master of the 4th level of the spatial system. He joined his fingertips together, and with a serious look responded with an understood. Behind him sat Gu Kaishan, who had his legs crossed and his head resting on his hand. He remained somewhat confused as he couldn't believe that their superiors didn't want Zhang Guo's grandson to be injured or end up dead. Yuan Guang turned around, put his arms behind his back, and with a calm voice explained to him that although that was true, no one knew what would happen if he got injured or ended up dead. He didn't know if he was really prepared for a battle with Xiao Zhengguo. He also asked him if Commander Duan from the Jiangnan War District knew about this. Go Kaishan started looking at him and remained silently thinking. Feeling his gaze, Yuan Guang couldn't help but panic with a confused look. He told him that although he had ordered the prohibition of leaking any information within the Tanjiao camp, once it ended, the superiors would know what had really happened. Gu Kaishan, who had his head resting on his fist, began to look at the ceiling with a lost gaze and sank into his thoughts. He knew that Xiao Baihan's strength was also considered outstanding. He didn't know if Zhang Chen could really kill him, and neither did he understand why he had created an anti-vision barrier. At the same time, Jiang's attack succeeded and he defeated the beast without much difficulty. While its body was surrounded by poisonous mist, it began to fall to the ground. Zhang, who was beside it, crossed his arms and thought that although this fierce beast was powerful, when facing the insects, it had really found its nemesis. Little Nine's attacks also started to take effect, and now Xiao Baihan's barrier had several cracks and was about to break. She walked away, clenched her fist tightly, and upon seeing this, couldn't help but start to smile. He grabbed the sword tightly and panicked at the thought that this was the end. He didn't know how it was possible that the life jade was starting to break. In the barrier there was a crack much larger and deeper than the others. Zhang began to look at the barrier, and with a calm voice asked Little Nine to attack from this part, since this was the weak point. At that moment, the voice of someone entered his head and asked him not to play too much, since the great master of the space system named Feng Chenjiuan had arrived. Upon hearing this, Jiang's expression changed drastically. He couldn't help but be shocked and panic at the same time. He reached out to Little Nine, began to absorb her, and gave her the order to return. Little Nine, who had a clenched fist and was hitting the barrier, couldn't help but be somewhat confused, as she didn't know what was happening. Now that an instructor who had a spatial system had sent a telepathic warning, he needed to finish this fight quickly or else he would be discovered. He summoned a giant insect, which began to approach the magic barrier and started to explode. Xiao Baihan, who was inside the barrier, started to look at the insect with a perplexed gaze and couldn't help but start sweating and panicking, as he didn't know what this was. Just before he could realize what was really going to happen, it was already too late. The insect that Zhang had summoned exploded, causing the energy to start entering inside the barrier. Because of this, a great explosion began to generate inside. The energy that was inside the barrier was so great that once it broke, it created a great explosion with the same force as a nuclear explosion. The explosion also broke the barrier that Luo Sando had created. She put both hands on her belly and started falling to the ground. Lu Henkyu, who was next to her, started running towards her, reached out her hand to grab her, and she asked her if she was okay. The explosion also created a large curtain of smoke. Several seconds later, once the curtain of smoke began to disappear, it could be seen that part of the ground was broken. There were flags lying on the ground, and now all that remained of Xiao Baihan was his arm and his sword. Zhang approached the area, took his sword, started looking at the arm, and seeing that only his arm remained, he began to question whether he had been rescued by the great master. Now that he had doubts, he decided to take the arm first as interest, since he would have the opportunity to recover the capital later. He approached Luo Sando, threw her the sword, and asked her to take good care of the sword that belonged to her family. As little by little the sword was descending towards the ground, she raised her hands to catch it, and while she was starting to blush, she thanked him. Lu Henkyu picked up the flags that were lying on the ground, and Luo Sando picked up the sword. Both approached Zhang. She had collected 3 advancement flags, so she told him that they were already among the top 10. Zhang decided to share the flags with them, but Lu Henkyu refused, since she wanted to see him surpass Zhang Wuxiang and win first place, and Luo Sando also refused, because for her having the sword was more than enough. At the same time, someone slammed the table hard. This person was Yuan Guang, and next to him was Feng Chenjiuan. He put both hands on the table, and with an angry look asked him what he was doing and why he hadn't been able to teleport Xiao Baihan in time. At the beginning, he closed his eyes and stayed thinking in silence. Then he opened them, and with a calm voice explained that the poisonous fog was too strong. His spiritual energy had barely approached it. He hadn't seen anything clearly, and the energy was corroded by the poison. Then he heard an explosion. He had tried to teleport Xiao Baihan with all his strength, but it was already too late. Yuan Guang started pointing at him with his finger, began staring into his eyes intently, and asked how it was possible for the poison to corrode mental power. After saying this, he told him not to excuse himself from responsibility. At that moment, someone gave a loud shout and ordered Yuan Guang to shut up. Upon hearing that, he stood up, turned around, and with a trembling voice tried to apologize. This person was Gu Kaishan. He started staring at Yuan Guang, and with an angry look asked him if he knew why he always got stuck at the peak of the fifth transformation. He explained that the reason was because he always followed the powerful, and could not pass the test of the heart. A moment ago, he had mentioned the great general of the sword, consequences and so on, and for this reason he hadn't even bothered to respond. If Gu Kaishan dared to do it, he also dared to assume the consequences on the battlefield. Even those invincible in 9 transformations could die in combat, so Xiao Baihan was nobody. Yuan Guang took several steps back, got a little nervous, and explained that he had not mentioned Xiaoxian Gu. He had only mentioned Commander Duan. Gu Kaishan turned his back to him, slightly turned his head back, clenched his fist, and with a calm look gave him the order to first report inside the camp, but keeping the information strictly confidential outside. Tomorrow at 6 before the evaluation and the camp ended, no one eliminated could be allowed to leave the camp, including Xiao Baihan. He turned his back on them, started walking towards the door, and told them that first he was going to go to the Southern Theater Command. Yuan Guang and Fang Chenjiuan started looking at him and remained silent. At the same time, a system window appeared in the sky and informed everyone that Xiao Baihan had been eliminated by Zhang Chen. Everyone started looking towards the sky, and upon seeing this, they couldn't help but be dumbfounded, as they were unable to believe that Xiao Baihan had been eliminated. They were in shock and thought they had heard wrong, since he was the legitimate grandson of the great general of the nation. In another part of the camp, a beast in the shape of a boar appeared. It tried to attack Tang Ying and Bai Feng, but they jumped and dodged the attack without much effort, causing its body to hit the ground. Tang Ying couldn't help but stay in shock. She couldn't believe that Zhang had really eliminated Xiao Baihan. Bai Feng remained calm and with a serious look thought this was very strange. In another part of the camp, a beast in the shape of a white lion appeared, but someone gave it a strong blow, causing its body to hit the ground. The person who had defeated this beast was Wushuang. He sat on top of the corpse of it, crossed his arms, and started to smile, and thought that this was very interesting. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part, someone started to open the lid of the cup. This person was the commander-in-chief of the Jiangnan military district, named Duan Xinghai. After removing the lid from the cup, he began to bring it closer to his mouth for a sip, started staring at Gu Kaishan, and asked if he had found any good talent for which he had urgently summoned him. In front of him was Gu Kaishan, who closed his eyes, extended his hand towards the sky, used an ability called Forbidden Listening, and while his hand was surrounded by powerful energy, he concentrated. Duan Xinghai started to look at him and remained silent. Gu Kaishan's energy began to advance towards the sky and started to create a barrier around the area. Once the barrier was successfully created, both went to another room, sat down to have a cup of tea and chat a bit. Duan Xinghai crossed his legs, took the cup of tea, and asked him why he was being so cautious, and it didn't take long for him to realize that this matter was more important than it seemed. Gu Kaishan, who had one hand resting on the chair, placed the other on the table, and remembering that old Duan had extensive knowledge and was theoretical, he decided to ask him something. He began to stare at Don, and with a serious look asked if poison could corrode mental strength. Duan took the teacup, started bringing it closer to his mouth, closed his eyes, and with a smile explained that theoretically it was possible, but it was very difficult, adding that poisonous mist and miasma affected the physical body, but mental strength was different. Mental strength consisted of the source of the soul, which belonged to thoughts, forming a kind of intention energy to corrode this energy. Duan could not estimate the intensity of poison needed. Gu Kaishan started to look at Duan and with a serene gaze asked him if he had seen anyone manage to do this. Duan put his hand under his chin, began to look at the ground, and with a thoughtful look replied that no, adding that he knew a poison king, who was at the pinnacle of the fourth transformation. But even so he could not do it. Duan raised his head, and with an insinuating look asked him if perhaps in the Tanjiao camp there had emerged a poison prodigy with terrifying power. If someone could really corrode spiritual strength, then it was a lethal weapon. Gu Kaishan crossed his arms, started shaking his head, closed his eyes and revealed that a conclusion could not yet be reached. Duan remained calm. Since Gu Kaishan had volunteered for the Tanjiao camp, he hadn't asked anything out of respect, but now he asked if something was happening, and also why he wasn't telling the truth. Gu Kaishan opened his eyes, started looking Duan in the eyes and asked if it was possible that the poisonous mist had its own consciousness. Duan reached out to him, started laughing and asked if he was joking. He didn't know how poison could have consciousness, unless it wasn't actually poison in just a form of camouflage. Upon hearing this, Gu Kaishan realized something. With a perplexed look he asked Don what the form of camouflage was. While a drop of sweat was falling from Don's cheek, with a calm look, he began to think. Several seconds later he remembered something. He started to imagine some ancient ruins that were somewhere in the realm. He had seen in ruin number 0 a record which mentioned a kind of calamitous insect called 9 wings miasma that could transform into the form of poisonous mist. He began to imagine little 9 hugging her legs. She had been born in the 9 hells. Her birth had caused a great ancient calamity, which had almost destroyed the world in the past. Upon hearing the name 9 wings of miasma, an ancient calamity, Gu Kaishan couldn't help but become alert and think that this was not good. Duan extended his hands to the sides, closed his eyes, started laughing out loud, and asked him if he was scared. He also mentioned that this type of calamity had been extinct for a long time. Nowadays it was impossible for it to exist. Gu Kaishan remained silent. Then a portal in the shape of a crack began to appear. He got up from the chair, turned his back on him, and while he was walking towards the portal, he no longer had any doubt that Duan was the chief commander since he could explain everything reasonably. Today he had learned a lot. He said goodbye to him with the excuse that he had some matters to attend to at Tanjiao camp. Duan extended his hand towards him to try to stop him and continue talking. He asked him to wait as he still hadn't told him the good news, but Gu Kaishan paid no attention and entered inside the portal. Once inside, he crossed his arms, closed his eyes, thought of little 9 and how she was a natural disaster. It was no longer surprising to him that Zhang Chen, who had awakened a divine-level class called Growth of All Things, was strong enough to become number 1 on the hunter list. He opened his eyes and with a serious look thought that Zhang still had many secrets. This in Dejia was grounds for decapitation. According to him, Zhegang was a traitorous master who was really causing problems. A few days ago, Zhegang appeared with a pleasant smile and explained that he had someone named Zhang with excellent talent, but not yet fully developed. He also added that he even got into trouble with the Zhaoyao family. He hoped Gu Kaishan could take care of him while he was at the Tanjiao camp. He turned around and listened silently. Back to the present, he started walking towards the other end of the portal, and it didn't take long for him to realize that Zhegang had asked him to take care of him, but in reality wanted him to cover for him. He exited the portal, and while he had one hand behind his back, he snapped his fingers with the other. The sword could kill, but it could also protect the world. Buddha and demon were in a single heart. He had said that he wanted to make Zhang his disciple, so from now on he was going to be under his protection. He started walking, and thought that calamities should not be underestimated, so to avoid misunderstandings, he decided first let Hangyao confirm it to be more sure. He launched an arrow, which started to move backward at great speed. This arrow contained an order for Hangyao. He had to go in the name of the master to relic number 0 to investigate the 9-winged miasma calamity. It was related to his little apprentice brother, so he asked him to be very careful. He entered the surveillance room where Yang Guang was, and asked how the entrance evaluation for the camp was going. Yang Guang turned his head back, and with a calm look explained that it was coming to an end. Those awakened with ordinary talents were competing among themselves to get the flags, and elite talents had already taken care of 9 fierce beasts. Now only one remained. A powerful beast appeared, but Lei Zi and Lu Bazai joined forces to defeat it. The beast tried to attack, but he gave it a strong punch in the face, causing its body to crash into the ground. Then another fierce beast appeared. Tang Ying and Bai Feng began to collaborate with each other to kill it. She jumped up, climbed on top of it and ended its life. At the same time, behind Zheng Huashuang there was a pile of beast corpses. He had instantly killed 3 fierce beasts that had been released in the area. After doing this, he started heading towards the direction where Zhang was. Du Keixin started looking at the screen, and upon seeing this, he couldn't help but be perplexed. He asked him where Zhang Chen was. In response, he revealed that Zhang had killed a total of 2 fierce beasts, and they had just released the 9th fierce beast near him. The 9th ferocious beast appeared, jumped and prepared to attack Zhang. He and the others started looking towards the sky, and upon seeing the beast, he couldn't help but feel happy, as now he was going to get another flag. As the beast was slowly approaching, Zhang extended his hand, and while his eyes were shining, he began to smile and told Little Nine that it was time to eat again. Just before the beast could approach and attack, Zhang extended his hand towards it, releasing Little Nine's poisonous mist in the process, which quickly started advancing. Little Nine manifested, and without much effort began to devour the beast. Thanks to this, he obtained 2,000 devouring value. The body of the beast fell to the ground, and Little Nine slowly began to devour it. Zhang, who was standing beside, simply remained silent. While Little Nine was devouring the beast, she ascended from level 21 to level 22, and upon doing so, she couldn't help but start smiling. Upon seeing that she had leveled up, Zhang couldn't help but start smiling with joy. His joy didn't last long, as a fist made of spiritual energy appeared in the sky and began to descend towards them. They looked up, and upon seeing this, went on alert. Nuhankui drew her 2 daggers, adopted a defensive stance, and with an alert look she revealed to Zhang that someone had launched a surprise attack on them. Luo Sando decided not to stand idly by. With a determined look, she extended her hand towards the attack and used the skill called Earth Protection Shield, causing a powerful green shield to appear around them. Zhang extended his hand towards the attack, and upon looking a little more closely he soon realized that this fist style was Wushwang's. The energy of Wushwang's fist began to impact against Luo Sando's shield, causing it to gradually start breaking. Her shield didn't last long, and in a matter of seconds it shattered into pieces. Due to the difference in strength, she and Nuhankui were sent flying backward and started bleeding from their mouths. Zhang was the only one left standing. He adopted an offensive stance, and with a look full of determination, he decided it was time to counterattack. Just before Wushwang's fist could reach him, Zhang extended his hand towards the fist, releasing Little Nine's poisonous mist, which began to halt the attack. Several seconds later, Zhang's body was sent flying backward. He firmly planted his feet on the ground to stop his moving body and put his hand in front of his face to block any other surprise attack. Little Nine's poisonous mist was so powerful that all that remained of Wushwang's attack was a curtain of smoke. Once the curtain of smoke began to disappear, Wushwang appeared, while his body was surrounded by a powerful energy. He clenched his fist and with a suffocating look began to approach Zhang. Seeing that even his poison could devour the wind from his fists, it was no wonder that geniuses called Zhang the demon of poison. The body of Nuhankui fell to the ground behind Zhang. While the smoke curtain was disappearing, he put his hand near his face, started looking at Wushwang, and thought that it was not in vain that he was called the 3rd genius of Daxia, praising him by saying that his punch also had quite a bit of strength. Zhang clenched his fist tightly, causing it to start releasing poisonous mist. With a smile, he asked him if he had come to compete with him for the fierce beast. He extended his hand to one side and prepared to defend himself. Wushwang began walking towards him, started laughing, and revealed to him that he knew this fierce beast had been poisoned by him, and all that remained now was its corpse. So there was nothing left to steal. Upon hearing this, Zhang's expression changed. With a serious look, he asked him what he meant by this. Wushwang clenched his fist with his palm, and while his body was surrounded by a red energy, he began to smile, and with an arrogant look asked Zhang not to misunderstand him, as in reality he was just curious and wanted to get to know. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part, Zhang extended his hand towards the sky, and while it was surrounded by little Nine's poisonous mist, he began to stare at Wushwang and asked him if he was willing to bet his life just to satisfy his curiosity. Wushwang clenched his fist tightly, and with a smile replied yes, adding that one must be at least willing to bet their life. Upon seeing this, Zhang decided it was time to get down to business. He extended his hand towards him and threw the poisonous mist at him. Wushwang began to stare intently at Zhang and with a smile, started to move his fist with great speed, creating powerful energy around his fist in the process. Just before the poisonous mist that Zhang had released could hit Wushwang, he opened his legs, used the skill called 1,000 Feet Walls, and launched a powerful blow towards the attack, creating a powerful barrier in front of him. Then he launched another powerful blow towards Zhang, and the energy of the blow was so strong that it began to shatter his poisonous mist and started to rapidly advance towards him. Upon seeing this, Zhang, who had his hand extended towards him, couldn't help but be shocked. He soon realized that this attack was very powerful. Just before Wushwang's strike could reach him, he put his hands over his head, jumped and moved away from the area. Although in the process he received a small part of the attack, his body began to move backward. He firmly placed his feet on the ground, lowered his head and thought that his boxing style was too fierce and fast, and his poison was not so strong and was very slow. Little Nine put her hands near her face, and with a worried look she began to worry about him. Now Zhang had his face and clothes full of scratches. He put his hand near his mouth, started looking at him, and with a smile asked Little Nine if she would be able to level up several times if she devoured Wushwang, who had a huge amount of he appeared in his consciousness, and Little Nine manifested herself. She placed her hands on her chest and explained that although she had leveled up many times, she was not going to be able to defeat Wushwang, but still she was willing to die instead of Zhang. He turned around, started to sweat, and with a confused look asked her if she was sure. This was the first time he saw Little Nine so scared. He concluded that the only way to win was by using the self-destruction ability because he had been fighting for a long time. He was now very tired. He put his hands on his knees, and while his body was shaking, he began to look at her, and seeing that she could not defeat him, he ordered her to hide and not come out since he was going to find another way. She decided to listen to him and stay hidden and not go out. Zhang could in no way let Little Nine die or everything would be lost. He came out of his consciousness, and while his whole body was trembling, he supported a hand on the ground to rest for a bit. Due to the attack, a smoke screen was created, and as the smoke screen gradually disappeared, Wushwang began to approach him, and seeing that he could no longer move, he thought that he did not seem like someone who could have defeated Xiao Baihan. Zhang decided not to stand idly by. He placed his hand on the ground, began to stare at him intently, and used the ability called Growth of All Things, causing vines to start emerging from the ground. Just before Wushwang could make a move, the vines began to burrow into the ground and created a barrier around his body. He started to look up and couldn't help but start smiling when he saw that this was Zhang's divine talent. According to him, it was interesting to use a barrier to deceive others. He concluded that Xiao Baihan had also been defeated within a barrier. At the same time, in the surveillance room where Yang Guang and Gu Keixin were, he turned around and explained to him that Zhang had blocked the vision again. Gu Keixin, who was standing behind him and was observing the barrier, gave Fang Chenyuan the order to be ready to rescue someone if necessary. He put his hand close to his forehead, gave a military salute, and replied with the understood. Yang Guang was somewhat confused, and as a drop of sweat was falling from his cheek, he explained to him that according to the situation of the battle, just now, Jiang Wushwang should be fine and he did not need to be rescued. Gu Keixin began to stare at the screen and told Yang Guang that he had said this to save Zhang Cheng. Yang Guang turned around and was even more confused. He asked him if he wasn't being a bit hypocritical. Gu Keixin approached him and asked him to stop talking nonsense since Jiang Wushwang was level 46 while Zhang Cheng was level 26. Zhang was his disciple and he just wanted to protect him. At the same time inside the barrier, Zhang stood up, reached out to the sky, and gave the insects the order to upon hearing the order. Thousands of insects shot out from his palm towards the outside. In the blink of an eye, the sky was filled with insects, which began to stare intently at Wushwang. He started looking up, and upon seeing so many insects, he couldn't help but be shocked and become alert at the same time. It didn't take him long to realize that this was Zhang's true ability. Zhang, who had his hand extended towards the sky and was releasing the insects began to advance towards him and prepared to attack. He spread his legs, adopted a defensive stance, used the ability called Move Mountains and Overturn Seas, and prepared to defend himself. While Zhang's eyes were shining, he began to stare at him intently, began pointing at him with his fingers, and started to release even more insects, which began flying towards him. In an instant, thousands of insects appeared in the sky and prepared to attack. While Wushwang's body was surrounded by a golden energy, he prepared to defend himself. He clenched both fists tightly, leaned back, began to look at Zhang, and with a smile used the skill called Overlapping Mountains and Staggered Peaks. Then, he struck the ground using both fists, and by doing this, hundreds of fists made of energy emerged from the ground and began attacking the insects, destroying them into pieces. Upon seeing this, Zhang decided to change tactics. With a serious look, he moved his fingers downward and decided to control the insects to dodge the attacks. While Wushwang was distracted hitting the ground, several insects dodged the attacks and began to quickly approach him. He raised his head, and upon seeing this, he couldn't help but be somewhat surprised. Once the insects got close enough, Zhang clenched his fist, and at that moment the insects exploded, creating a large smoke screen. But to his surprise, Wushwang jumped up and came out as if nothing had happened. Zhang started looking up, and seeing that he was alive, went on alert and began to wonder what was going on. Wushwang began to descend towards Zhang, and with a smile finally realized how Zhao Bihan had lost. He extended his hands towards the ground, used the skill called Wind Fist, and a powerful golden energy began to move towards Zhang. He put his hands over his head and thought this was not good. The energy began to create great pressure, which started to make Zhang's body begin to fall towards the ground. His energy was so strong that Zhang fell to the ground and his body began to tremble. He soon realized that this Wind Fist was several times stronger than the previous one. He did not know if this was the strength of an invincible descendant. 2 insects had exploded near him and had not even scratched him. Little by little, Zhang began to run out of strength. With a tired look, he began to look at Wushwang and concluded that to finish him off it was necessary to make dozens or hundreds of insects self-destruct. For him this was very difficult, since it had been very complicated for him to raise these insects. He had no other choice. Near Wushwang a large explosion was created, and then more began to be created. He did not fall into the trap and quickly stepped back. But to his surprise, this was what Zhang had planned. While he had one hand supported on the ground, he extended the other towards Wushwang, causing several vines to emerge from the ground. Just before the vines could get close, using only one hand, Wushwang blocked the attack and asked him not to exert himself since the fight had ended. Zhang couldn't help but be shocked. He couldn't believe that Wushwang no longer wanted to continue fighting. He asked him what he meant by this. Wushwang, who was standing in front of him, recognized that he was worthy of being his rival. He was only in the first transformation and was already forcing Wushwang to use 80% of his strength. He was eager to fight him when he became stronger. Zhang placed a hand on his knee, and as he was getting up, realized that what he had said before about betting his life was to force him to give it his all. All this was just to see if he was a worthy opponent. Wushwang put his hand behind his neck, closed his eyes, began to yawn, and told Zhang that he was tired and was going to sleep for a while. After saying this, he asked him if he could take care of the last fierce beast. Zhang began to look at him, and with a serious look asked him if he was leaving him the first place. While Wushwang was touching his neck, he turned around and with a calm look explained that he did not mean this. He was just tired. He wanted to leave since he needed to find a good place to sleep for a while. Upon hearing this, Zhang felt a mix of frustration and anger at the same time. He clenched his fist, began to shout, and asked him to stop lying, as he was not one of those fools who were affected by pride. Wushwang turned his back on him, and as he was walking away, he closed his eyes and couldn't help but smile, since he knew that he had not been mistaken and that Zhang really was an interesting opponent. At the same time, in the surveillance room, Gu Keixin crossed his arms and while watching the screen, told them that one should not rely on strength to oppress the weak. According to him, Wushwang was truly an invincible descendant, and today he had indeed made Gu Keixin look at him with new eyes. Fang Chenjiwan was poisoned again and his mouth filled with foam. Yang Guang approached him, placed both hands on his back and began to help him. Gu Keixin gave them the order to release the 10th fierce beast on Zhang Chen to let him win first place. A fierce beast with the shape of a centipede and a scorpion's tail began to descend from the sky. It opened its mouth and prepared to attack. Zhang, who was standing on the ground, began to look up, extended his hand and prepared for battle. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part,